Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the faros.ai Tech Talk, Token Intelligence. Know what your AI spend is actually doing. Today's session is going to be recorded. The recording and slides will be available to you after the session. And you are free to ask questions at any time during today's session. So please use the Q&A at the bottom to submit questions, and we'll answer them during the Q&A section near the end. My name is Evan Bruns. I am a forward deployed engineer here at Faros. So a lot of technical depth I'll be able to share with you today, and happy to get to the nitty-gritty in those Q&A questions again. Where I want to start today is talking about AI spend, right? It's really becoming a top of the mind issue, and unfortunately, it's a little bit of a black box budget line. So an organization might know they're spending 1.8 million monthly on AI token spend, but things like team attribution, which models are being used, which individuals are driving up those costs, and the actual outcomes produced are all very unclear. It's said that 94% of engineering leaders can't actually expend, explain, or justify their AI spend. There's a reason for that. Conventional approaches to measuring spend haven't quite kept up with the realities of AI. So OpenAI, Claude, they'll have their vendor dashboards, but these typically only provide aggregate cost metrics. Hey, you owe us this much, right? That doesn't tell us about those individual team members. Traditional developer productivity tools have focused purely on core code metrics. So Dora, Space, those metrics are great and very important, but they don't tell us things about AI at the sort of granularity that we need in the modern day. And lastly, token meters that you might be running as a developer on your desktop are very good for tracking your own personal use of tokens. But again, it's not going to give that organizational view of how much is being spent and what that spend is actually producing. So fundamentally, as we see at the bottom, none of these tell you whether the spend was justified or what your organization needs to do to make better use of AI. This is where Faros's token intelligence comes into play. And this is really based on two sources of truth. For one, we're going to connect to the session logs produced by your AI tool, giving us very granular look at the actual conversation happening between the human and the AI. We're combining this with Faros's classic offering of a unified engineering data model. This intakes your org chart, your code repositories, your tasks and initiatives, and is able to provide an end-to-end view of what's happening in your software development lifecycle. Because of this, we're able to look at particular uses of AI, understand what tasks it was being used for, or what PRs were being produced, and then we're able to qualify this AI usage into four categories: productive, inefficient or unimportant, and finally, wasteful. Let's go ahead and see how this works in the real Faros product. To begin with, I'll start by answering the question of where is my money going and what is it producing? What we're looking at right now is the AI spend for a given team within an organization. You'll see here at the upper right, I'm looking at my cloud consumer team, which contains three additional sub-teams: productivity, collaboration, and direct to consumer. For any one of these teams here in Faros, I can select the box to see information about how they're using AI. So obviously they're using, for example, on my productivity team, a total of $916. This is about 50% going to frontier models. We can see that exact model breakdown here. And we can also see what types of tasks are being done in those AI sessions. So, for example, around 70% of the productivities team's usage of AI is going to feature work. And then there's a little bit going to quality assurance and bug work. This might differ between teams, and we can understand, how different teams have decided to leverage AI. At more of an organizational level, we've got this outcomes view. On our bars here, we'll see basically a combination of people spend and AI spend. So putting salaries alongside the cost of AI. This, of course, correlates to our outcomes, this red line. This is saying how many things were actually delivered by this team. So examples of outcomes would be things like merged PRs. We can see here we get a cost per outcome. This is basically a blended cost of that human and that AI input. And this chart really lets us get an idea of the balance of where spend is going between people and AI tooling. So those are kind of our answers to the question of where our AI spend has gone. The next natural question would be, how can I improve in my usage of AI? This is where we go to our efficiency view. So, as I mentioned before, we're really looking at two elements of AI productivity in order to get these four classifications of scale, optimize, inspect, or stop. On our x-axis here, this is the level of efficiency of using the AI. So if you're using the AI very well, it'll be on the far right. If you're using it very inefficiently, it'll be on the far left. The y-axis here is strategic importance. This is basically how important was the work being done by the AI. So we'll see here our three teams of productivity, collaboration, and direct-to-consumer have slightly different situations. Direct-to-consumer is the smallest circle, so we can say they're using the least amount of AI, but they're using it most strategically and most efficiently out of the three teams. On the other hand, our productivity team is in this upper left quadrant, meaning they're doing important work, but they could be more efficient in their usage of AI. So if we're trying to decide where to invest additional funds on AI, this consumer direct team would be probably our top priority to scale. They're not using very much, but they're using it very efficiently, and there might be opportunities for them to use more. Conversely, I'd want to talk to my productivity folks about how they can better use AI to continue doing the high value work that they're doing, but hopefully in a more efficient way. Now, of course, we might put these teams in touch with each other and have some sort of cross-team collaboration to try to get people fixed. But really, we want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how can I improve my AI efficiency? So, for instance, on our productivity team, I can open up our diagnosis here. This is going to give me a view of why they're losing those efficiency points. So obviously on the left here, our max would have been 100 points, but we're going to lose points for a number of different categories, but I would say these generally fall into three buckets. The first one would be outcome quality. This is what is actually being produced by these sessions with AI. So obviously, if things aren't being produced, that would be one mark against outcome quality. Another problem we might see would be producing outcomes of poor quality. So, for example, a PR that takes 20 or 30 comments back and forth maybe needs to be fixed before it's able to be merged versus a nice, clean PR that gets merged straight away. Now, the second bucket that we're going to see here is really related to human skill around using AI. So, when we see things like prompt clarity or context management, this reflects how I am using the AI as a human. Am I writing good prompts? Am I managing my context well, meaning clearing out that context window when it's no longer relevant and saving myself tons of tokens, right? In this case, we see folks on this team are not doing a good job of that. The last category where we're seeing loss of efficiency here would really be the tooling around the AI. So retry efficiency or tool leverage. Retry efficiency is basically a measure of when the AI tool spins and tries something again, does it have the right information to get better at what it's doing, or does it just make the same mistake again? Tool leverage is essentially when my AI is calling the tools that I've built for it. Do those tools work as intended, or do they crash and force the AI again to repeat tasks or try things again? So fundamentally, these efficiency points measure the various areas where we can lose efficiency with AI. And obviously, the most critical ones will be bubbled up here in this view in faros. Now, while this is great to understand what's going on at the team level, we might also want to understand how we can improve as an organization. And this is where our last screen, control, comes into play. This will give me a number of suggestions for my entire organization on how we can better use AI. These are ranked on impact, so basically how important we think they'll be to do. So we'll see we've got three here today. The first one would be adding success criteria and diagnostics to stop brute force iteration loops. This comes back to that retry efficiency we were talking about earlier. We basically need to provide better guidance on what the AI is doing, and that could allow it to repeat less. In this case, we think about 10% of this particular bucket of spend could be saved, so about $500 could come out of this. Another example might be adding additional context and success criteria before retrying edits, right? Hey, if we're doing an edit failure, make sure you have the right information before you continue. We might also see suggestions like budget caps, rerouting certain work to certain models, or other things like that. Really, anything that boils out of your data here will be reflected on our control screen. So that was our demo of Faros. Let's hop back into slides real quickly here. So one other critical thing to talk about here is that all of the data we've seen so far today is also available through that Faros MCP. For those who aren't familiar with MCP, that's Model Context Protocol. It's basically a way for an AI tool of your choice to talk to the data in Faros. Faros also offers a native chat capability for this within the platform. The idea here, though, would be twofold. For one, as a human, we might ask the MCP very specific questions about what's going on with our AI spend. So, for instance, if there was a question you had that wasn't reflected by one of the charts or graphs we saw earlier, you could ask that very specific question and get feedback. The other side of this is that the MCP is also available for communication with autonomous agents. So developer agents or co-pilots, when they're given work, can actually use the Faros MCP to curate the correct context for what they need to do. So they can understand potential problems they could cause with the work they're doing, how that work's gone in the past, or other things like that that might be relevant to what they're doing today. I think this MCP is a great part of this really being the bigger, being part of the bigger whole of the Faros platform. So obviously we've talked about token intelligence at length today, connecting the spend to the outcomes that it produced. Um, the MCP, I think, obviously is relevant to that. It's also relevant to some of that context engineering that we're talking about on the right here, right? Making sure every task starts with the appropriate context. And finally, in the middle, we do have the optimized piece of the Faros platform, which is providing engineering diagnostics and understanding how those are impacted by AI as well. Fundamentally, though, everything here is running off of that Faros engineering world model, really bringing all your systems together such that this data is available, comparable, and that we can draw meaningful conclusions from it. So let's return to the questions that I used to frame the demo, right? The CFO might be wondering, where is the AI spend going and where am I getting outcomes from it? We can show you which teams, which tools, which models are using AI and connect that back to outcomes so that you can understand if that spend is useful or wasted. The CTO might be wondering, where do we scale AI investment? With that efficiency view, you can see which organizations are making good use of the AI they have and which ones need to improve their processes before scaling. Finally, the burning question for so many folks across organizations, how can we use AI more efficiently? By diagnosing the reasons behind your inefficiency in AI, we can give you specific recommendations on training, tooling, model selection, and more on how to improve that efficiency. So for an individual team or your entire org, Faros can be the step to getting that higher efficiency with AI and getting more bang for your buck. Awesome. At this time, I'm going to pause for Q&A. I see one here. How do you distinguish tooling versus behavior problems? I think we talked about that a little bit in the efficiency breakdown, but fundamentally, we're going to see different signals coming from tooling problems versus behavior problems. So for instance, in that session log, if we're seeing retries or tool failures, that's going to be strongly indicative of tooling issues. Versus if we see prompts that are vague or very long or have other issues, those are going to be more indicative of behavior. Most teams do have a blend of both, so it's certainly good to invest in improving both. Um, but yeah, that's fundamentally we are able to tell the difference as well. I see one other question. I see the tools like Claude make sense, but do you have capabilities to track tokens and credit spend on tools like Adobe, Kriya, D5, etc.? That's a great question. So really this token spend offering from Faros right now is focused on the engineering lifecycle. So one of the reasons for that is engineering has very clear outcomes, right? Most engineers are producing PRs or some other unit of code, and that's very easy to track. I will say that broader team productivity metrics are certainly an area we're interested in, but engineering is where we're starting out when it comes to this kind of token spend and token efficiency. Thank you so much for the question, Brendan. Awesome. So thank you guys for the awesome Q&A questions. I'm just going to be finishing up here and directing you to a couple resources we have on our end. So one report I would highly recommend, go ahead and scan that QR code on the left, would be the engineering report on acceleration whiplash. This talks about some of the patterns we see with AI. For example, you're driving way more PRs, but if your review process gets bottlenecked, what's that doing to your overall throughput? That report can tell you more. On the right here, we've also got the AI efficiency, token efficiency field guide. And that's going to give you more about what we were talking about today in terms of how we measure those tokens, how we figure out the efficiency, the strategy behind that token spend. Last but not least, I would highly recommend that you join part 2 of our From Token Spend to Outcome series, where we're going to talk more about the relationship between coding sessions, efficiency, and value. That is going to be on Wednesday, August 12th at 10 a.m. PST. So coming up very soon. Thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.